So Kindra Hall, it's so fun to have you on. You know, we both spoke at GLS, and I come out the door, and I think you had just watched maybe my keynote or somebody's, and I walk out, and there you are, and I'm like, Reese Witherspoon is here, and you're like, no, it's not. It's Kindra Hall, and oh my gosh, it's such a treat to have you on. This is going to be super fun.
I love this. I mean, your reputation precedes you. We've never crossed paths officially before, and so I was really disappointed because I had to get right to the airport, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to see her, and then there you were, right outside the door, and it was a meant to be moment. So congrats on that excellent event. You were amazing. Congrats on your new book. You're doing such great work. It's an honor to be here.
Well, this is going to be about you, so we're going to dig in. So tell me, when did you become aware of the power of story?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think back on, because if I'm being completely honest, I was 11. So I was which is a young age, right, to discover the power of something. Yes. But I feel like that's the case. There are other people that I follow that I admire when they say, well, I first discovered I was great at this when I was in 5th grade. And so I was in 5th grade. It was an assignment for our 5th grade English class. We were supposed to read a book. It was kind of like the first adventure into public speaking. We were supposed to take a children's book and go learn it and tell it to a 3rd grade classroom. And when I got into the 3rd grade classroom to do the assignment, I put the book down and I just started telling the story. And up until that point, it had been pure chaos in that classroom. 3rd graders everywhere. It was at the end of the day. I mean, it was a disaster. And as soon as I started telling the story, I distinctly remember standing there and thinking, hold on a second. They are in the palm of my hand. Like I had, and even at 11, right? I liked the power. I felt like I had so much power. And then I went for the rest of my 5th grade year. It was in the spring, so there was only a few weeks left, but I never came back to my 5th grade classroom. I went and told the story in every single classroom in that school. And there was a moment there where it was like, wait, if I want people to listen, maybe what I need to be doing is telling a story. And really that's where it started.
Wow. And so, I mean, storytelling and Kindra Hall go together, right? Like, yeah. When did you start to embrace it professionally? And at some of, obviously the reason is because you saw the power in its ability to transform and connect and hold people in a space. But this is what you do, what you stand for. It is Kindra Hall equals story. Get me inside of when you started to really lean into that hard professionally.
So as I went through my education, it was storytelling in business was the topic for my master's thesis. I went into sales and marketing, and it was all about storytelling. And I remember getting kind of frustrated because even as we were trying to position products or launch marketing campaigns, it was, here's the greatest price and here are the key ingredients. And I knew it was wrong. But really, I would say a turning point for me was I happened to cross paths with a thought leader, someone who was giving keynote presentations, talking about success and achieving new levels. And I saw this person speak. We crossed paths, and I said, you really should include a story here. I don't know what made me think that I could do that. And so we actually ended up working together, me behind the scenes, and the transformation in his work, whether it was written or on the stage, was profound. Wow. And I remember he said to me, if you can teach people how to do what you did for me, you would have a career. And that's when the wheels started turning. And I had to look inwards to say, how do I do what I do? Once I figured that out, then I could start teaching other people. And that's really where it started professionally.
Yeah, I love that. And so what are the components of a story that sticks, which is a title of one of your many books? I mean, what is the components of that will stick and people will remember it and maybe even apply it and maybe even change the way they do what they do in their life?
Yeah, I think one of the things that has been so important for me in my mission of more stories equals better leadership, better business, better everything, is demystifying what it is that makes a story great. So several years ago, I mean, it would have been 5-6 years ago now, worked with a reputable research firm to study what are the components that make a story more compelling, more memorable, more influential. And it really came down to 4 key components. And Molly, it's important to me because so much of the work that I do is story and business. And I know that people in business, they don't have a lot of extra time. They're not there, in a creative writing course. Like they want to check things off a list and make sure they have what they need to get the job done. So I'll tell you what the 4 components are. The first one is we need an identifiable character, a person, not the name of a company, not a brand, but an individual that we as the listener can identify and subsequently identify with. We are going to experience this story through this individual. If you leave that individual character out, there's one wall that you're building where it's not a story, it's just a vague collection of language. The second thing a story needs is authentic emotion. And make no mistake, all business is emotion based. Humans make decisions based on our emotions, and then we justify those decisions with logic. And even if it is a small emotion, an everyday emotion, guilt, a little bit of hope, a little bit of angst, it doesn't have to be, overcoming the greatest obstacle or, achieving the greatest success.
Summiting
Small
Everest.
moments are. Exactly. You don't have to do, fine. But we're not talking here about stories on the big screen. I'm not teaching you how to write a screenplay. I'm talking about how you can relate to your employees better, how you can relate to your customers better, and they're experiencing these authentic emotions on a daily basis. Third component is a specific moment. So if you're thinking back to any English class or writing class that you took, we need the listener of this story to be in that place and time there with you, where, maybe you're telling the story of a big business decision you had to make. You want them sitting in the chair next to you at that boardroom table. So it needs to have this specific moment. And then the fourth component is 1 or 2 strategic, specific details. Often we leave those out. We think, well, we only have a short period of time, but those small details are what draw people in without them even realizing it, to make that story a co-creative process instead of just a one-way street. So those are the 4 components.
That's good stuff. So anybody that's thinking, I think about Kendra when I was a sports agent. One of the things I used to always tell my young agents is it's one thing to tell a guy that you're recruiting, for example, man, we're always there for you, right? Like we are through thick and thin, like from the moment you get drafted through the big, and it's a whole nother thing to tell them a story about a player that we did do that for. It crystallizes it so much more. And so I think from a business development perspective, it's powerful. And I know you talk about other components too, founder stories. And other layers of it as well. But character, emotion, a moment, I'm hearing you say, and then 1 to 2 just really solid details. And that story will land and push forward with somebody.
Well, and to your point, I would imagine that all the agencies were saying, we're going to be there for you through thick and thin. And if anyone's sitting there fielding a variety of different options, and whatever those options are, right? Whether they're deciding who their agent is going to be from a sports perspective or a real estate perspective, or they're trying to decide what brand of socks to be loyal to. For the most part, everyone in each of those categories is going to be saying the same thing. So when the person you're trying to pitch to walks out the door, how do you make sure that you're the one that they remember? By doing exactly that. Take those high-level things that you say, we're going to be there for you when things get tough, and they always do, we'll be by your side. Say that, but then what is a story of a time where you did that for someone? And I know anyone listening to this right now will know that if they walked out of the room in that moment, that's the story that would stick with them. So why do we not? And the truth is, having those stories or in the moment thinking to tell those stories isn't necessarily our default. And so it is going to require a little bit of intentionality on your part to say, okay, these are the key messages I need my person to walk away with.
Yeah,
Whoever it is that I'm talking to, these are the things, the high level things that I always say. Here's this story I can tell, this story I can tell, and this story I can tell. If you don't think about that before you get into the meeting, you're in trouble. But a little bit of thought can go a long way when it comes to those stories.
It's funny, Kendra. It makes me think. I always think about the things as a salesperson, sales leader, period, that differentiate you in a significant way, and then pull back and say, what are the stories that ladder up to that? What are the common objections maybe I hear when I'm selling or pitching? How can I ladder up a story against that, right? And it's so powerful. I remember I was on a flight once, and my young agent who was working with me missed the flight, and he didn't make the flight. I had to fly to Phoenix, and he had been running point with this player primarily. And so I get on the plane, and I'm like thinking to myself, do I even go, right? Like, I have nothing. I don't have the pitch deck. I don't have a couple things that we had put together for him, nothing. But what I had, Kendra, is stories. And I walked in and just told one story after another, because that was really in the moment all I had. But my point is, it's what you're teaching is so powerful in life. I mean, I think about young kids when I always tell my daughters, when you're getting ready to sit with somebody, it's one thing to tell a potential employer, I work really hard. Like, I do. And it's a whole other thing to tell them how you stayed at an internship till 2:30 in the morning packing boxes for a colleague.
Exactly.
It's a whole other deal. So,
and we know this as you say this, and this is where sometimes I feel, it is kind of, I remember when I told my dad that I was quitting my job and I was going to be a professional storyteller. And of course, he had known since I was 11 that this was a thing that I was good at, and I would tell at storytelling festivals, and I was studying storytelling in school. But when I said, this is going to be my job, he was like, everybody knows about what are you talking about? You can't, this isn't a job.
Did you tell him a story about why this is going to be your thing? Did you make it a story?
I know. Yes, I'm sure I said, well, this is what I'm sure I told him the story of the guy that I'd been working with. But just because we know because we think we know how obvious stories are, it doesn't mean that we ever, it's the same as like, we know that we're supposed to eat healthy and exercise. Do we actually do it? Not always, right? So I think my job's a little bit easier, encouraging people to tell stories, because the other thing, Molly, even as you said that, even as you were telling the story about your team member missing the flight and you having to sit down and you getting on the plane, and even as describing the authentic emotion of being like, do I even do this? I don't know if you noticed, because here we are, but I was eating that up, and we listen differently when we're hearing stories, and we lean in, and we open ourselves. As listeners, we open it more. We open ourselves when we tell stories, so people understand the essence of who we are. Like, there are so many benefits, whether it's being memorable, whether it's being influential, or, especially right now, we're trying to more and more, it's getting harder and harder to establish trust with people, because we're so skeptical. We've been burned so many times. One story told, it's showing the essence of who you are through that story. Like, I can tell who you are by telling that story on the plane. I'm like, this is a person who cares. This is a person who wants to do a good job. This is a person like me who freaks out when things don't go the right way, but can figure it out in a pinch. There's a lot of benefit there.
That's cool. So I want to think too about you, and you talk about this in your work, the relationship with story in our own heads and hearts, right? Our self-talk. Tell me a little bit about the way that plays out in our own heads, because what do we have, 70,000 thoughts a day, right? We tell ourselves all these stories. Some of them serve us and take us where we want to go, and some of them don't. And I love, in your most recent book, you tell a story that kind of hits home for me, because Kirk Cousins was quarterback at Michigan State. He's now in Atlanta. And it's a really cool story, candidly, about a halftime when Patrick Peterson basically looked at everybody and said, guys, we just need 5 touchdowns. And essentially, it changed the story they were telling themselves, and in turn, oh, geez, how did that happen? Did you hear that? Sorry. Let me. And essentially, it changed the
I
story.
didn't hear it, but I know.
Essentially, it changed the story they were telling themselves, and in turn, the outcome. So, we don't need to sort of dig into that particularly, but I guess I'm curious, how does that play in to how we show up, how we perform, how we execute, how we lead, right? How we sell, all of that.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question that we are storytelling creatures, right? They've studied like what is it that made the human species, so many tens of thousands of years ago skip entire evolutionary like procedures was our ability to share through story, to put into like take this very like high level concepts that weren't about a rapids in a river or poisonous berries, so that we could organize and work together. And just as we were storytelling creatures outwardly, at the same time, we developed an inner narrative, an inner storyteller, which has a variety of different names, right? We can call it the inner critic, we can call it self-talk. I mean, there's no shortage of different ways to think about this voice, except for the fact that we all know we have this voice. And this inner storyteller has been collecting stories over the course of our lifetime and cataloging them and collecting them, curating them. And this is so automated. It's like the blood in our veins and the breath in our lungs. Like we don't have, this is part of evolution. We don't even realize it's happening until every once in a while we come up against, and because it is part of the evolutionary process, most of the time these stories are meant to keep us safe, right? So that we don't get like kicked out of the tribe, we don't go too far, and then they never want to see us again. We don't, eat a poisonous berry because whatever, we're dreaming too big. And so, but we've seen the benefit now of like paying attention to our like doing breath work, right?
Yeah,
Not just letting breathing be automated. We're by taking control of that. We've seen the difference in measuring our heart rates. Like I've been running and like people are obsessed with zone 2 running. I've never looked at my heart rate. So I'm like, why can't I do it? Why can't I run in zone 2? Right. But the same is true for our stories. It's really important that with that evolutionary automated process, we stop and say, okay, what story is my brain feeding back to me? And is this story serving me? Because a lot of times it's going to be a story. So I mentioned, I started running and the story that my brain, I realized, was playing back to me was that I couldn't run. I've never been able to run. And one of the stories that came up is when I had to run the mile in high school, and I was so bad at it that as I finally came around the last loop of the track, the class was going in. Like they were already gone. Like they just left me. I mean, I must have been going very, very slow. So of course, whenever I thought that I should go out and run, that story was playing. I didn't realize it until I went looking for it. So in big ways and small ways, our stories are affecting those decisions. We can stop the automation, choose which stories we tell ourselves to then encourage the action that we actually want to take.
How do we identify when we are having these self-limiting beliefs? Like, what was it for you in that moment when you went, you know what, I'm going back to that kid on the track when the door was open and all these kids were leaving me out there and I was huffing and puffing trying to just finish that lap. How did you kind of connect those dots? Because I think about oftentimes in life, we don't realize there's so many subconscious things that happen inside of us as human beings. We don't realize it, but boy, it feels like, man, how can we do better at realizing it so that we can shift to a story that's going to take us where we want to go faster?
Yeah, I think that that is the hardest part. So it requires self-awareness of that. So one of the pieces of advice that I give is whenever you find yourself in one of those quiet moments in a day where it's just you, so maybe you're in your car on your commute, maybe it's in the shower in the morning, maybe it's when you're in the kitchen and you're the one making dinner, What are the thoughts that are on repeat? So, for example, and this isn't necessarily about the running situation, but I started to notice that every morning as I was getting ready for the day, all I had on repeat was, there isn't enough time. There isn't enough time. You've bitten off more than you can chew. You have too much to do. You're never going to be able to do it all. You don't have enough time. And it was just and it had all these different versions of it, right? So in those quiet moments when your brain is working but nobody else is distracting you from it, take a listen and see, like, what are the things that those automatic stories that are playing. And then the next step is to be like, okay, so where is this coming from? Why do I, and so for that example, for me, I remember I always overscheduled myself.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know anything about that.
But it would always be my mother saying, you're doing too much, you're doing too much, you're doing too much. Now, did I ever fully crash and burn? No. Did I love all of the things that I was doing? Yes. Like, it was all of these. So I had to, like, go back and be like, where is this old story coming from? And then it's to look and say, okay, is there a different story I could tell myself? And what do you know? I had all of these stories of working best when I was under pressure, right? Turning in my best work when it was a project that was so big. Like, that is when I did, even down to, like, the best nights when I was a waitress. You've seen this, right? At a restaurant, when you go in and the restaurant's really slow and you get the worst service and you're like, there's nobody in here, because even the service staff is built for delivering the best service on the busiest shifts, right?
Right.
So then going back and thinking about, like, my shifts at the Outback Steakhouse when I had too many tables and there were too many people, and that's when I performed my best. So then I could start telling myself that story, and suddenly I was like, oh yeah, this is just watch me kill this day.
Yeah.
And it changed everything.
So you're just a closer, right? I mean, you're just give me the ball, coach, when it's tight.
Exactly.
I
Let me
love
do
that.
it.
Well, my mom has been, and still does at 53, says you're taking on too much, but I have crashed and burned, and so she has been right in times and taught me in that way. But there are stories that we have from our youth that don't serve us, right? That don't always take us where we want to go, and so recognizing those seems important. I always think it's interesting to consider, what's an outcome that I really want? Like, I want to start running in the zone 2 space or whatever it might be. Yeah. And what's the new story that I need to tell myself to get me there? Because for whatever reason I'm stuck and I'm not going there. Tell me this, what is the relationship between storytelling and resilience? Because I would think those go together and are important to unpack.
Yep, exactly. So even because, resilience is about continuing forward into the unknown, or when things are rocky, or when everything isn't going as planned. And whether you yourself are personally in that situation, you're leading a team where things aren't, like, the path isn't clear, or if it is, it's fraught with challenges. The self-storytelling, or the way that the leader positions that story, is absolutely essential. And this is one of the key things that I teach when it comes to whether it's leadership for the leader themselves as they're leading forward, is this concept of being in the middle of a story. And when you're leading and when it's challenging, when you're, down at halftime and you're in the locker room, to see this isn't the end of a story right here. I am in the middle of the story. And whatever happens next will become a piece of the story I can tell myself later. And in that process, you release some of the pressure of the story already being written. It's already done. It gives you an opportunity to see. So, for example, even in this, for me, for running. So I was in a dark place about gosh, was it like a year or so ago? I was writing my third book. It wasn't going well. I was at the point where I was like, I might just have to return the advance. Like, I'm done. I can't do this. And, this is the plight of an author. And I was thinking, this is the thing that I'm good at. So what do I do if this is the thing I'm good at and I can't do it? And so I, on a spur of a moment, signed up to run the New York City Marathon. Now, keep in mind, I had run a total of 11 miles in the 2 years combined prior. I signed up. I didn't tell anybody. I had no business running the marathon, but I started the training, and I distinctly remember telling myself, I needed resilience, right? I needed that grit. Telling myself, this is the middle of a story. With each training run, I'm learning something new. It's a story that I'll tell later. And when I crossed the finish line of the New York City Marathon last year, I had, not only from the race itself, but all through the training, all of these new stories that I had collected and curated, not only when it comes to running, but whenever I try to approach a new thing, now I can say, well, I had no business running that marathon and it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Look at all the lessons that I learned. Look at all of so seeing those moments as new stories that you can put as part of your, collective stories that you tell back to yourself. And that's, I think, where true resilience is built.
I think that's so cool because I think people, and this is something I talk about in Dynamic Drive, but people pursue goals in service of what I believe is a one-way street and an outcome, a moment in time.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is win or lose, right? Fail or not, whatever the outcome, you're still in the middle of it, right? Like, 'cause
Exactly.
we're still breathing and waking up tomorrow, hopefully, blessing.
Yeah.
But, and so we're in the middle of it. I think that's a really cool reframe. And then the way that has helped you, and I love all your Instagram stories, right? I mean, they're so cute when you take a picture of New York and the street and you're getting ready to go run and crush it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's external stories, Kendra, like stories that, sorry, Kindra, that was not good. Did you hear that?
Oh, I know you froze
me?
there. You froze. I couldn't see you.
There you go. Oh,
yeah.
see,
Yep,
that's
I can hear
crazy.
You
now. Oh, wow. Here we go. And there's external stories, obviously, as well, Kendra. And so when we think about that, it is so powerful from a business perspective. And you talk about the types of stories that we should think about there. And you talked about it briefly. And I think it's interesting because you talk about value story, founder story, purpose story, customer story.
Yep.
And tell me a little bit about how, from that business lens and also just the external story lens, what role does that play in how we show up in service of story? Is there a delay?
Okay, I lost you for a second. Do you hear me?
Weird. Yeah, I got you now.
I know. I'm losing you now.
Okay.
It's so weird.
You are?
Okay,
Let me
can you hear
switch
me?
Yeah, I can. But I hate that. I'm sorry. Can you hear me pretty good now? Let me just come off.
Now I can. Now I can. I know it got...
Let me just go to this Wi-Fi real quick.
Oh, now you're just...
Okay.
I mean, I looked like I was frozen, but I wasn't. I was just holding my face. But I can't even... I should send you... I want to take a picture of you right now. You look so concerned. Hold on. Wow, you're still frozen. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I'm going to text
you.
that to you. Oh, I can hear you. I just took a hilarious photo of you that I'm going to text you.
Lovely.
It's super funny. You look so... You were frozen and you looked so concerned. Oh, but now you're frozen again, Molly. I can't.
I'm just plugging in my Ethernet cord, which I have never. I often don't need it, but I'm gonna just let me go to other networks. Here we go.
Oh yeah.
Why is that not? Hold on.
And let me.
Huh. Why is that not? Okay. I'm plugged in
Got
as a
it?
backup. Yeah. Can you?
Oh,
Are we
there.
pretty? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's pretty
Cool.
good.
Good. Good. All right, girl. Here we go.
Okay. So you were
Uh,
asking about founder.
And tell me this while we've got a hot second. Is this something you want to dig into or not really? Because this is kind of from this more recent book. Would you rather we can just
No,
talk
we can
about
talk about
external stories
the
in general?
so those 4 stories are good. Those are the ones from Stories That Stick, which I think are really we can
Okay.
talk briefly about that. Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
Oh, you're
Is
so
there?
clear now.
Oh, good. Interesting. Well, let me ask you this. Is there anything other than, I mean, because we talked a little bit about that. When you think about external stories, is there anything
Yeah.
else you'd want to focus on or we could lean into a little bit more that's maybe a little bit more for the general world versus so B2B?
Yeah, I think we can let's see. We can talk briefly about those 4 stories and then
Is
yeah,
external
'cause
story important to you to teach?
yeah, yes, like
Okay.
that's what I spent a
Okay.
lot of time teaching. So
Okay.
I can talk like purpose stories are kind of that category of like the external
Cool.
stories that you tell from a leadership perspective. So
Perfect.
I can talk about
Okay.
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll tee that up at a general level and then
Okay.
we can dig into that. External stories are absolutely powerful in business. It's something that we know is also in place in our lives, right? Sort of external stories. And we talked about it briefly, but you talk about there's 4 kinds. You talk about value story, founder story, purpose story, customer story, which sort of talked a little bit about. Purpose story, though, feels particularly interesting to me. And tell me a little bit about what role that plays when we think about external story.
Yeah, again, telling stories is like I think it kind of solves all problems, right? Like a good piece of chocolate or a nice bottle of champagne. Like if you're telling stories, it's typically a good thing. Purpose stories are the kind of stories that you tell to align teams, and that team could be anything. It could be a team at your organization. It could be a team at your local community center, your church, your school, whatever it is. Where again, we take the things that matter to us and match a story with it, and like why we do what we do. And I think that particularly when we're talking about stories at work and in any specific role that we have, whether it's professional or a leader, we oftentimes only want to tell stories that are within that job description, right? To keep it safe. But there's so many stories from any of our experiences, our lived experiences that we can share that again illustrate the essence of why we're there, why we do what we do, and why people should get on with that mission and follow us forward.
No question. And so, how do you coach leaders and individuals inside of teams to think about? Because I always think it's kind of interesting, right? A company has a purpose statement and a mission statement, and I talk a lot about this in my work, which is that I think it's important that, I mean, it's fascinating that companies have purpose statements. I think people need them as well.
Yeah.
It becomes this guiding light for organizations. What do you tell teams and leaders when, the organization has a purpose story, and the individual also has their life, and they're a human being with their own values and mission? How do you coach teams and leaders to come together on that in service of high performance and alignment at some level with the individual's purpose in their life, the organization's purpose, albeit we want people to be who they are authentically, but we also want to make sure that we have the right people on the bus that believe in the corporate purpose.
Yeah.
How do you talk about that?
So I want to give like a specific opportunity that there could be, because again, the more stories you tell that are representative of the company's values, of the leader's values, of then trickle down into all levels of the organization, the clearer that will be. So as we're listening to stories, we're saying, that's like me. I feel this way. And so you can do all of that through the stories that you tell. So, for example, I was working with a CEO of an organization, and they always had new people, and he was new to telling stories. It wasn't something he wanted to do originally. Some of his team members brought us together, and it ended up being a really great thing. And they would have new members of the team coming in like every 90 days. It was this kind of organization, not because there was a lot of turnover, but that's what it was. They were bringing new people in, and after working on and seeing what his stories could do, this CEO would go to that orientation day, the first day of orientation, and go give a presentation. Now, again, instead of saying simply, this is what we're about, this is what we do, you're here because you believe these things, he told a story. Now, it was the same story every time because it was new people every time.
Sure.
So he told this story about being like a Boy Scout. Like, it was more than it was like Boy Scout, but like on steroids. Like, they weren't giving steroids to the Boy Scouts, but you know what I mean? Like this ultimate, like,
he was a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, exactly. And this like camp that he went to where they basically just abandoned them in the woods, and how he had to like find his way and all of this. So he told this story that had nothing to do technically with his role as a CEO. However, the qualities that he had to present in that situation, the challenges that he had to endure, we wove that story so that they all became a representative of the same values that this organization stood for and what they were anticipating all of their team members to become a part of as well. So he would tell that story, and you could see in the room people connecting to him, connecting to that greater vision, the essence of what all of this was. And then they went out and could find their own stories that showed how they connected to this vision. And as he did that, it gave them the opportunity to tell stories from their lives where they exhibited those values and can bring them to work. And there was a lot there, but you could see how, because it just all goes together.
Yep. So I'm hearing you say that the organization has a purpose, their vision, their mission, if you will. As a leader, you want to pull through something personal at some level or professional, regardless, that shows and shines a light on the organization's purpose in which he's asking everyone to or she to live into.
Yep.
And using a story to help illustrate how resilience and discipline and trust and connection and collaboration all showed up for him in that way, and in turn helps him lead the organization and even better in light of that.
Yep. Well, and this is the thing here's a list of places. I find it's easy. The hardest thing about telling stories is finding your stories, even though you've lived them. Right.
Totally.
So here's a few prompts that you can do. Make a list of the values or the things that are most important for the organization, whether it's a business organization or a nonprofit that you're committed to. When is a time in your life personally where you've seen these qualities exhibited, where you've had to endure challenges that brought out these qualities? You can look from a personal perspective. Maybe you played sports. Maybe you were, maybe it was a family vacation where you had to endure these things, whatever that may be. Another place that you could look is professionally. When have you seen these values in action? And then the third question you can ask yourself is, when is the first time? Like, when is the first time I saw these values in action at this particular organization, right? And it could have been something so simple as the way that they handle the first day of school, or the way that we don't have to go big. It can be really small moments that, if told right, can illustrate the bigger theme.
Yeah, that's cool. So give me those 3 prompts again. Those are money.
Oh
Those are
gosh,
great.
now if I can remember 'em.
Oh,
Okay, so
sorry.
take a look. No. If you can look in your personal life from when those values have been exemplified, or you've had to endure something that brought out the essence of what those values are, that can then translate and be successful in this organization. Number two, take a look within the organization, within your experience. When have you seen these values exemplified? Much like you said, an agent saying, "We'll go above and beyond. We'll be with you
Sure.
And then if nothing else, think about the first time. Firsts are very emotionally charged moments. So the first time you saw this value in action, it might have been a really small moment. But the first time, you'll usually find a story there.
That's cool. That's good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kendra, you've been super generous with your time. This is cool. I need more Kendra time, because the truth is, all I do on stage is tell stories. And
You're a great storyteller.
Well, I may need you to hire you to consult and give me some coaching, girl. But we end with rapid fire, so I'm going to hit you with some quick ones. All right? You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So success is fill in the blank.
Extremely individualized and fluid.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever received, and who was it from?
My grandmother said I was looking on the ground for dropped pennies, and she said, "You're going to find better things looking up than looking at the ground."
Oh, wow.
Wow,
Very
I can't
cool.
believe I filled that one out. I remember that, though.
Wow, that's really cool. That's cool. What is something you're reading right now, watching right now, or listening to right now that's really making an impact on you, and potentially others might enjoy it?
I am reading a lot of fiction novels.
Really?
I am. I used to only read, right? Because I'm an achiever. I need success. I need
You're
success.
an Enneagram 3, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't even know, but probably, yeah. I need to figure out my
You
Enneagram,
are.
but I would only read business books, personal
Yeah.
development books, like I had to get better and better. And then I was like, I think for someone who loves stories, maybe listening to or reading some stories would be good. And so I have, it has been really transformational, actually, to be
Wow,
listening
cool.
to fiction. I listen on Audible, so I'll listen on flights or I'll listen on runs. Yeah, which is so, right? You're like, wait,
But it makes sense.
fiction?
What
Yeah.
you're saying makes a ton of sense. And
Yep.
because I'm that girl. I'm like, dude, why would I mean, like Halloween, it's kind of going to be plus or minus this podcast release. I don't get it. Like, I don't understand pretend. I don't understand fiction. I don't watch.
I know. Yeah.
And my team makes fun of me. But anyway, you make a great point, right? That I bet you do. You get to see the character and the arc and the emotion and all of the things that you unpacked at the beginning of this conversation.
Exactly.
That's cool.
Yep.
How do you use story in your personal life?
I use story a lot with my kids because they're always looking for a frame of reference to understand the challenges that they're facing. I have two middle school kids, so a 7th grader and an 8th grader. So whether I am telling them my stories or my husband is telling his stories of those challenges, the silly mistakes we made, the friendships that came and went, or pointing out to them when they're like, I can't do this, it's so stressful, there's too much going on, pointing out to them when they, in previous times, have risen to the challenge, because it's really easy to forget how far we've come. I think that's a mistake that so many adults, especially achievers, make. And I want my kids to always have the ability to go back and retrace their steps via the stories that I tell them, because we easily forget them, of how far they've come. So equipping them with a frame of reference in that way.
I love that. I love that. So the show's called Game Changer. So one last question. Who or what is a game changer who inspires you, and why?
This is always hard, but I've been calling her my game changer for a long time. I would have to go with Reese Witherspoon, honestly, because that woman, like, you think about it, she was a child star. I know this because I started being told I looked like her when I was like a sophomore in high school, somewhere around there. So she's been around for a long time, and could have just gone the acting route. when she ran into the problem that so many women run into, is there weren't any more compelling roles. So she started her own production company, and then she started her own, I mean, Reese's Book Club, from what I understand, is if you're in Reese's Book Club, then she can option it to make a film out of it. Like there's like she has, and then she
Sunshine
sold her
Network.
company,
Yeah.
for like almost $1 billion. So,
Yeah.
I mean, here's something, you look at what the trajectory of other child stars. And she decided not to play by everybody else's rules and to write her own game.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, a remarkable woman, and I
And
thought
with
that's
class,
who
right? And with class and like a
100%.
good time, yeah.
100%, very relatable.
Exactly.
Very relatable, and I know, and I was actually glad it wasn't Reese that day when I walked out that door, and it was Kindra Hall.
Yay!
So listen, you are awesome. Thank you for sharing the power of story, and I know that this is something that I can lift up, and so many of our listeners. So Kindra Hall, you're a rock star. Thanks so much.
Oh, I loved being here with you. Well, I'm sure we'll have many more conversations ahead.
Absolutely. All right, girl, big hugs.
Bye.